very special guest, Dr. Darryl Hardie, who is a plant biosecurity, surveillance and entomology specialist and consultant who's recently retired from DPIRD in WA from a very long and illustrious career. So a little bit about our timeline today. I'll be talking briefly about CitrusWatch and our early detection network program. And then I'll be handing over to Dr. Hardie to discuss the managing of Citrus Gall Wasp in our gardens. You're more than welcome to throw some questions out throughout the webinar. Just raise your hand in the chat or post your questions in the chat. Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen. There we go. Oh, my tiles have skipped ahead again. There we go. Okay, everyone can see that okay? Radio. So some of you are joining us from being part of our early detector network and a number, oh, it's getting ahead of me. Oh, there we go. Let's see if it's going to stop for me. So a little bit about our program. For those of you that aren't already part of CitrusWatch, CitrusWatch is a surveillance and education program funded by industry along with our project partners, Hort Innovation, Plant Health Australia, Citrus Australia, Northern Territory Government and CSER Australia. The purpose of our program is to conduct early surveillance on priority exotic citrus pests that we have identified as part of our biosecurity plan. Those are the Asian citrus psyllid, the African citrus psyllid, glassy-winged sharpshooter, and the disease that Asian and African citrus psyllid are vectors for, which is Huanglongbing disease, also called citrus greening disease. There is also citrus canker, which some of you may have heard of. We've had some recent incursions up in the north, as well as Xylella or citrus variegated chlorosis. The early detection network involves us sending sticky traps with lures to home gardeners, as well as various botanic gardens, community gardens, education facilities and other stakeholders to detect whether or not we have the presence of this pests and disease in our in Australia. So far so good. We haven't detected any and we want to keep it that way. So none of these pests and diseases are currently known to have a presence here. And we want to keep it that way. So we run 2 programs a year, and that is through autumn in April, May, which we're just coming to the conclusion of, and then we'll be running again in September September, October for spring. So our latest deployment, which was the autumn season, to give you an idea, we've deployed 244 traps in the southern region, including 222 volunteers. Now, this is just for the southern region. We do also have the north, which is administered by our colleague over in the NT Gov. And you can see a little bit of a breakdown there of the states. You might notice we're quite low in numbers in WA and South Australia. So we're quite keen to get some more trappers on board, and we'll post the links in the chat as well on how to sign up for it. There's a little bit more of a breakdown state by state. Some of you might even be able to spot your house from here. It's a little bit zoomed out. Okay, and there's our links. If you want to find out more about CitrusWatch after this webinar, you can go to our website, or if you'd like more information, you can contact us at biosecurity@citrusaustralia.com.au, and also feel free to follow us on Instagram and YouTube, which the webinar will be posted to that YouTube address as well. Okay, so moving on to the main star of our show, Dr. Darryl Hardie. A little bit about him. He is a Plant Biosecurity, Surveillance and Entomology Specialist, current recipient of the Dr. David Banks Biosecurity Lifetime Achievement Award for his significant contribution to national plant biosecurity during his 48-year career. He's overseen as a surveillance specialist, delivered strategic and day-to-day direction to plant biosecurity officers, including the Chief Plant Biosecurity Officer, and provided oversight on plant-related incursions to incident management teams involved in DPIRD responses. So I might hand over to you, Dr. Hardie, and who's here to talk to us about Citrus Gall Wasp.
Okay, thanks for the intro, Jackie. Yeah, I hope I'm not a bit rusty. I've been retired for nearly a year now, so we'll see how we go. Look, I spent the last 20 years of my life trying to engage the public because I've realised how important you people are. You're in your gardens all the time. You see things, and you might know that I just plug this here. It's the My Pest Guide T-shirt. I was one of the developers of that, so we could get the public involved, and they had ways of reporting, and it was a two-way response. You go backwards and forwards, and that's why this webinar today is so important, because you'll get feedback. You're helping industry, and I apologise for my camera fading in and out. It does that occasionally. I must get a new camera. And I apologise also that I'm operating out of my lounge room, which normally in these, when I do these, I'm situated in a laboratory or a studio. So just see how we go today. But yeah, so yeah, you do an incredible job. And as you know, citrus seems to get a lot of issues from fertilising and all sorts of stuff. So and lots of pests, and we don't need any new pests. So the Asian citrus psyllid and the African citrus psyllid are certainly things to keep out. But as you are trapping your little yellow traps, they will pick up the, they'll also be sort of like a control measure for the Citrus Gall Wasp too. They're attracted to yellow sticky traps, I believe. I haven't deployed them. I use pruning as my major weapon against this pest. So my history with the Citrus Gall Wasp goes back about probably 20 years. I was talking to a colleague in South Australia, well, it's not doctor, but we call him Dr. Greg Baker, really a good entomologist. I think he may have just recently retired because he was trying to get up 50 years of public service before he retired, but I think he probably has retired now, or at least as part-time. And I said, look, what pests coming from the east that we really want in West Australia? And the top one, he says, don't let Citrus Gall Wasp in. It's a real nightmare. So anyway, Citrus Gall Wasp did get into WA about 10 years ago. There was a bit of a token effort, unfortunately, to get rid of it. It should have been more earnest effort, but it's in the metropolitan area and it's spreading now. Now, Jackie, just for you, I'm going on to Sabrina Hahn. She's the local sort of like ABC gardening person in Western Australia. I'm going on her program Saturday week, and I've already lined up. I'll be talking about nominating people for the Biosecurity Awards, upcoming Biosecurity Awards, but she gets so many questions about citrus, and she'd love to actually help so she gets less issues with them. What I can do is I can, on ABC Radio, I can actually put a call out for people to sign up to help with CitrusWatch if you're interested.
Oh, that would be amazing. Thank you, Darryl.
She has a big coverage around the state. So yeah, I'll do that for you, no problems. So let's get into the crux of the matter now, the Citrus Gall Wasp. That seems to be the bugbear for everybody. It used to be the other one. The one we used to get all the inquiries about is the citrus. It's the one that the leaf miner. But anyway, since we got Citrus Gall Wasp, the citrus leaf miner has sort of dropped off the radar a bit, but you probably have that as well. The good news is that some of the suppression methods for Citrus Gall Wasp work very well on citrus leaf miner as well. So keep that in mind. Anyway, as a bit of a background, in case you don't know, and the other thing I might mention at this point is if you have any questions, just put your hand up and Jackie can moderate that, and we'll answer them as go along. So it's a bit more interactive for you. How's that? So the Citrus Gall Wasp, it's a native to Australia, so we can't go overseas and find out how they're controlling it. So we have to do our own methods here. And it's a native to southern Queensland and northern New South Wales. Probably it's come out of the rainforest. It's co-evolved with the finger limes. They're the ones that they call the caviar limes, the way you get the actual. They use the little beads that come out of the limes and put into fancy drinks and things like that. They're quite expensive to buy. So that's where it co-evolved, and in that, when things co-evolve, they do seem to not become overriding pests usually, because it's not a good idea to kill your host or maim it so it can't reproduce. So they've actually come to a bit of a Mexican standoff where you do get issues in finger limes, but they're not as bad as you get with cultivated citrus like lemons and grapefruit and things like that. So what we're finding is that Citrus Gall Wasp, it'll actually, as you've seen it, has everybody seen Citrus Gall Wasp? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So you're all very unlucky. So Citrus Gall Wasp will actually it will weaken the stem, and it looks unsightly. So a lot of it's cosmetic, but a lot of it is also, it weakens the stem. So if you get strong winds or a lot of fruit bearing on the limb, it will snap the limb and cause issues there. It doesn't seem to, I don't think it impacts productivity so much in the fact that it stops fruiting or anything like that. It's just that the fruit can actually cause the weight of the fruit. When you've got the stem weakened, it can snap it and you'll lose your productivity that way. So it's and it's, as I said, it's moved across Australia, and it's got into Western Australia, and we're lucky in Western Australia. It's only in the metropolitan area. It hasn't actually got into production areas as yet, and there's a big push to keep it out of production areas as long as possible over here. So the major controls at the moment, I break it down into 4 areas. Usually when you're controlling a pest, you talk about cultural, biological, and chemical. But I'll toss in another one, which is sort of like a cultural control too. I'll call it area wide. So area wide. So with Citrus Gall Wasp, it only attacks new growth, and it's the insect has a very short life cycle. Well, not has a long life cycle, but the adults only live a very short time. And they're poor flyers, and yeah, so it doesn't spread all over the place rapidly. So if you've got a problem in your neighbourhood, and there's a lot of people, everybody in Australia seems to have a citrus in their backyard. If they have a backyard, at least one citrus. I've got, let's see, 460 square metres of pseudo rainforest here in Perth, and I have 3 citrus plants at the moment. So yeah, even on a small block like that, I have my citrus. So the ones I'll be showing you today are of my Lisbon lemon. Now, so it only attacks new growth, which is a real problem. So it's synchronized with the major flush, which seems to be in the spring flush. So citrus will flush several times a year. So a lot of the literature you'll read will say, you know, remove the galls by July or August, or before they actually emerge, and you can see where they emerge by the galls have actually got holes in them. Now, that is probably not going to help if you're doing that early, because then you'll get if you do that, well, if you do that early and then you get a flush, then you're going to get reinfesting when the new wasps come out. So my strategy, or not just my strategy, the strategy I use is to actually look at the galls as soon as you start to see them, then start pruning them out. So that's usually February, it's late February, early March. And in Perth, we can get an autumn and even a early winter flush, depending on the temperatures. So that's when a good idea is to fertilise your plants then. If you fertilise in spring, and you have pruned them out in June, you'll get the emergence later on, and then you'll get new infestations. So pruning is certainly what I consider the most effective method. There are biological methods. There's two native parasites, but they seem to be largely ineffective from an economic point of view. They don't actually do a good enough job. So we can't just rely on that. So you're probably looking at more of an integrated approach. So yeah, like I said, get your neighbours involved. If you can go out 3 or 4 neighbours and get them to prune their stuff out, then you're actually really protecting your property, because you're the centre, and the further you push it out, the better off you are. Okay, now there have been other trials and that done. So chemicals, I'll start with, there's some work been done on kaolin clays as a barrier to protect during spring. They're a suppression tool. The other thing is petroleum oils. They're the same sort of thing. They're a suppression tool. In citrus leaf miner, I know that petroleum oils, they actually don't form a barrier. What they do with the citrus leaf miner is the moths don't like the smooth or the slippery surface, so they won't actually lay eggs on the surface. And that may be the similar impact or similar effect you're getting with the Citrus Gall Wasp too. I'm not sure about that. As we have already discussed, there's sticky traps and non-drying traps, and they work to a certain point, but there's no killer solution where everybody goes to the doctor these days and wants a pill to fix their ailment overnight. The other thing that has been tried a lot of, and it's usually it's really catered for the commercial growers, is there's this Confidor Guard, which is a systemic, which is a pour-on root drench. But the problem with that is for backyard growers, it's only available in commercial lots. I think the smallest container is about 5 litres. It's probably not cheap. And the major problem I see with that, there's a 20-week withholding period. You can't harvest fruit for 20 weeks after applying that chemical. Now, the window of opportunity I see for backyard growers, larger trees, like I'm looking at the window, I can see my 3-metre lemon tree, which really needs a hiding because it's getting out of control, and I'm getting old, and getting up ladders is problematic. So yeah, I'll certainly bring that under control. But when you have, so if you're planting a number of citrus, small citrus, and you want to protect them, and you're cutting out a lot of foliage, it's really hard for the citrus to get going. Then I can see for the backyarder who's planting a number of citrus, that the systemic, the imidacloprids, the Confidors, and those sorts of chemicals would be quite effective, because they're non-bearing trees. You wouldn't just eat the fruit off them. You could actually treat them, and then if you've got any fruit, take them off anyway, because that's just taking the vigor out of the tree. Okay, so is there any questions about treatment at this point? If not, I'll move on to actual pruning.
There's a couple of questions in the chat, Darryl. Sorry, this is Jess speaking.
Okay, yes,
from
yes.
CA. There's a question specifically about finger limes. One, the most reliable or economical prevention methodology for finger limes. And then the second question is how to manage affected finger limes affected with Citrus Gall Wasp. So there's 2 questions, but they're related. Okay, then I'm just looking through. I can see. So how far back into the program is it? Oh, that's the latest comment. Latest comment. Am I going the wrong way? Oh, yes, here we are. I was going the wrong way. I was going towards the top there at the bottom of my screen now. Question specifically for establishment most reliable economical prevention method. All right. So prevention is very hard. Avoidance is probably a better way of putting it, by pruning, similar to the more commercial and domestic lemons and things like that. Pruning is the way to go. I know that people have tried netting. That doesn't work. So most reliable economic prevention. So the same as for commercial fruits, or your standard lemons and oranges and grapefruit and mandarins. Yeah, the same method. Prune out. Now there's finger limes there's some I've seen that are actually grafted onto root stocks, and some are grown from seed. So like I said, and how to manage affected finger lines with citrus gall. Yeah, so they're both the same. So the same methods again. At least you're dealing with a lot smaller plant. And the internode distance, I believe, on finger limes is a lot smaller, and that's why it's probably not going to be as heavily attacked. And they're a bit more probably wild in their behaviour, so they probably tolerate this the gall wasp a lot better than domesticated type lemons and things like that. But I'm not saying don't interfere with them. I'm saying, yeah, if you want to, yeah, and people like showing off their finger limes, I'd say, yeah, prune it out, much the same. So get in early, February, March, prune. That's when you put your fertilizers on to get that autumn and late autumn and late summer, early autumn flush. And then don't wait till July, August, September. I mean, I noticed this year I wasn't getting anything coming out, and they're still emerging in September. But by the time you prune then and you get a flush straight away, the wasps are still active, so you're going to run into problems. Okay, I hope that's answered your question.
No, Darryl, we also had a hand up from Nola.
I've put my hand down because my question was going to be about netting, and Dr. Hardie has already answered that question in his response.
Netting's been used for fruit fly quite effectively, protected cropping, but it's getting one fine enough. These are very tiny, these wasps, and they can get through and if you make the netting, I'm sure they could develop a netting that allows light to go through, but so a lot of the nettings that if they put a very fine weave, they're going to cut down the light getting to the tree, and therefore you cut down your photosynthetic ability. So I think there is scope for netting, but it hasn't, because it's an Australian only situation, then develop netting that works. The other thing with netting, and if you do netting for fruit fly, a lot of people just put the net over during the fruiting period, which is fine, and just let it go down to the ground. Now, if there's fruit fly underneath the tree and they emerge out of the pupal cases, they're going to go straight up into the tree. Tie it off around the base of the tree, and then you'll restrict the fruit fly getting there. Of course, if the fruit's leaning against the net, it's still going to get stung by a fruit fly too. So yeah, it's fun and games all round. All right, what I will do now is I might just move on to pruning. Now, citrus are very resilient to hackers of fruit trees. They do really well. And people go, oh, how much should I prune off, and where should I prune, and how should I do this? Look, it's trial and error. Like I said, you want to keep the fruit tree compact and open. Now, I don't know if everybody can see this. I'm going to try it. They're my secateurs. They're Felco #2. Do yourself a favour. Get yourself really good secateurs, okay? They're about $100. These ones are 10 years old. I've replaced the blade once because I actually got a bit of fencing wire. I didn't realise it was there. I thought it was I was pruning, but I was pruning a fence in the end. So I actually put a new blade in about 5 years ago. But the blades are easier to keep clean. I've spruced this up a bit today. I've just used some inox on it, so it's nice and lubricated. But get a pair of Felcos. Now, as you get older, yeah, cutting through the branches can be more difficult too. I'm not saying everybody's old here, but I think some of the people are probably a bit as old as you can buy all fancy secateurs, ratchet and things like that. The other thing I have is this beast of a thing. It's a pocket silky saw. These go for about $100. This is over 10 years old. I've just put a new blade in it recently. I bought it online. I put a curved blade. These are deadly sharp, okay? So when you get some of the thicker branches you want to take off to actually keep your tree under control, these really work well. So you start off with a back cut and then you come down through the top so you don't actually strip all the bark and that off. And then you can just tidy up with a second cut if you need to. But these work very well. Now, careful, they're very sharp. So we'll try and go here first. So here's the Citrus Gall Wasp, surprise, surprise, right? And this is on a very small tip prune. It's actually quite interesting, this one. It's developed in one of the spines. Can you see the spine against me? Yeah, can you see the spine? Now, so you go along there, oh, I'm just going to prune that out, take that, no problems, right? But you've got to keep your wits about you, because if you look further down here, you can see there's another gall down here. So you want to actually trim back below that gall. Now, I would say that stem's too thin to worry about. I would trim that stem totally off. The other thing that you can run into is this one here. Now, there's a few gall wasps on this one here, as you can see, and I've sacrificed the lemon here. Now, there's a lot happening on this stem. Okay. Now, if there were bigger stems, I would thin it out, just have 1 or 2, just fork it. But at the moment, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stems coming out of there. So that's just too much. So no, easy sacrifice that and the lemon. So, all right, we're sacrificing a lemon, but you get the yield back later by keeping it nice and trim. Once again, the stem is, there we go, the stem is too thin. I usually go about the thickness of my thumb. That's where I cut them back to, okay? Now, the other thing is, where do you cut them? A lot of people, you notice the number of nodes. I've cut the leaves back on this so they're not all confusing. Sorry about the photography here. But just above a node, okay? Not on a node, because that'll destroy the node, and just above the node. And for disease purposes and things like that, I spray my secateurs after use. When I've got production fruit and things like that, I spray them with ethanol and then oil them. Okay, so the third one I'll talk about is this piece here. As you can see, this is getting close, come on, close to the thickness of a finger. So that's what I'd trim back to, okay? So, and to a fork. So as you can see further down, there is a fair bit of citrus gall wasp there. I wouldn't be tempted to prune it there. I'd actually go further down and probably leave 6-9 inches after a fork, and then prune it there, and you'll get growth coming out of the nodes here, and you'll get good fruit establishment there. And that's the flushes, the late summer, early autumn flushes that you put your nitrogen fertilizer. Now, a lot of people talk about fertilizer. I'm a bit, I don't like carrying a lot of fertilizers. You can get fertilizers for everything. So I just usually have a combination. I have urea, which I don't put on citrus. And I have NPK blue, which I use just all my garden plants. And then I use a slow release for baskets and pots and things like that. Because if you buy a fertilizer, azalea fertilizer, rose fertilizer, lawn fertilizer, you end up with 50 bags of fertilizer, and it just gets confusing. So I keep it simple, and a lot of nurserymen do the same thing. They just have very, very simple, and they sometimes will mix a bit of the urea if they want a bit of more nitrogen into the NPK blue. Now, there's NPK red, which doesn't have as many trace elements, and there's NPK blue. They used to be coloured, so they were red and blue, but these days a lot of them aren't. They're just all blue or grey. I even got one that looked like a sandy colour the other day. So that's pruning. Now, pick your plants. I'd prune back about 1/3 if you can, and if it's a really big tree and you don't want to go too crazy, you can trim it back over a couple of years. And eventually you will get on top of it, but it's a thing where you're going to have to do it every year to keep on top, pruning it, because they'll keep invading. The lemon that I took, the Lisbon lemon, I took those prunings off today. I use my garden as a bit of an experimental experiment. My wife gets crazy with me, but I pruned it quite hard back 2 years ago, and just to see if the Citrus Gall Wasp would it come back, or was it I just got unlucky. The other thing was I noticed that last year I had a few Citrus Gall Wasp, but not too many. And I didn't prune it, but this year I'm just looking out the window at the moment. I can actually see Citrus Gall Wasp. It's quite prolific. It needs a heavy prune to bring it back under control and remove the gall wasp. The next thing is, what do you do with all these prunings? A lot of people just throw them in the bin, and then they become somebody else's problem. But ideally, the best idea is if you've got a mulcher, just put them through there, shred them, and that'll take them out. The other thing you can solarize them, and that is a bit problematic as we're moving to winter at the moment, because you can put them in black plastic and leave them in the sun. You've got to find the sun. And I find if you're going to put in black plastic in the sun on concrete is good too. Okay, and leave them there for about a month, because you really want that bag to heat up. The bag will get up to 50, 60 degrees, no problems. And most insects start dying anything over about 41, 42 degrees. And that's 41 or 42 degrees, about 5 minutes. But getting that whole bag above 40 degrees this time of year is going to be problematic. So you can burn them as well if you're allowed to. So just so here you go with that. Now, there's a senior rule from around Australia, and I'm based in Perth. I can't say that I know exactly when your Citrus Gall Wasp is going to emerge. And there's a lovely calculator online that you can actually get. And I'm sure Jackie's probably sent that to you before, or can send you the URL. And when you go into it, just click it defaults to Yanko, and you can actually go in and change it. And there's different areas around Australia where you can put in. So I know there's for Perth, and I think there's one for the southwest as well as in WA. You can actually do it. Okay, so that's quite interesting. So it gives a description. It shows you a calendar when they're going to emerge in your area, the current status, predicted dates of emergence, previous records, and there's an about thing in there as well. So as I mentioned, if you're really serious about your citrus and you want to keep them clean, nothing except pruning, nothing will eradicate this thing at the moment. You can control it with pruning and suppress it with chemicals. But certainly the Confidor Guard, if you've got new citrus going in and you want to protect them for the first 3 or 4 years until they're getting up to a good size, and you're not going to eat the fruit, you can treat them once a year with this Confidor Guard. Remember, it's a 20-week withholding period. And the good thing is Confidor's got a bit of a bad rap because it's been associated with things called bee dementia and things like that. But because this is going as a soil drench, there's not as much translocating up to the flowers and causing issues. So that's good. As a foliar spray, if you put it on where the plant's flowering and it's attracted to bees, then it is an issue. But the good thing about Confidor is that it's 5 times more effective as a soil drench as it is a foliar spray. Okay, and when it comes to soil drench, you can actually put it on in the watering can. You don't have to have any fancy gear, so you can mix it up and put it in. But like I said, I think it's only available minimum amounts 5 litres. I did some googling on the APVMA website. There is a couple other chemicals, but if you're really serious, you can look around for them. Now. How far are we going? Yeah, we're going pretty well.
We've got a few questions coming through, Darryl. Do you want me to read them out now or later?
Yeah, you can read them out. I'll just make one little plea I've had from the WA citrus people first. They know that Citrus Gall Wasp is in the metropolitan area, and so they're asking people not to report it if you're finding it in the metropolitan area. Report if you find it outside the metropolitan area. And one other thing I'll mention, if you're buying new citrus, have a good look at it, because you don't want to bring Citrus Gall Wasp home to your place if you don't have it. Some of the citrus, I've been told, in some of the nurseries, retail nurseries, is actually people have found infested with Citrus Gall Wasp, which isn't good, but it's very hard to keep out. So just be careful what you buy and have a look at. Buy from a reputable nursery and good root stock and that. So yeah, what are the questions now? Sorry.
So Carol has asked, and I think this was in relation to when you were talking about fertilizer. Sorry, correct me if I'm wrong, Carol. Can we have a list of recommended products used? Now, it might be more a case of you reiterating what you as Darryl use in your garden and clarifying that. Okay,
then. So like I said, I just keep the fertilizer simple. You can buy citrus fertilizer. No problems. Like you can buy lawn fertilizer and that. It's just that I've got lots of different types of plants. I spend 3 or 4 hours every day in my garden, my wife and I. So we're actually garden nuts. So
Yeah, so that's why I have to keep it simple with the fertilizers. I use NPK Blue. I'm not advocating that you must use NPK Blue, but yeah, it works for us. We get good yields of citrus off our plants, and avocados and banana, everything. I use the one chemical for it. Citrus are very hungry feeders. They have shallow root systems, so mulch them up. Get lots of mulch over the root system, out to the drip line. Keep it cool and increasing summers. I've actually had some of my palm trees, the actual crowns have cooked out this year. It's been so hot in Western Australia. I know that my children live in Sydney and they just talk about buying snorkels and flippers because they seem to be underwater all the time. But over in the West, it's been very hot and dry, and I think we're expecting a 29 degrees again today, and it's been 29 every day for the last week. So summer's just rolling on, and we've had no rain for 6 months. So you need to keep the water up to these plants as well if you're having dry spells, to maintain fruit yield. Okay, so that I hope covers the one there.
Thanks,
I did mention the clays you can for suppression. There's the oils, and also there's things like Confidor, which you can buy. Okay, as far as the chemicals go, and those chemicals they work against with citrus leaf miner. A lot of people in WA are growing citrus as hedge plants, and they don't like the citrus leaf miner in there. They won't like the Citrus Gall either, but they don't like the citrus leaf miner in there because it makes the leaves go silvery and they go brown, and they've worked out very quickly that traditional insecticides don't work against that either. So when you've got soft, tendril, new growth, you've got to keep the oils up until it hardens off, and that can be like 6-8 weeks after you get a flush. So you've got to spray the oils every week for 6 to 8 weeks, or even longer if it hasn't hardened up. Okay, there's a little tip for you. You can't just do it and forget about it. When the insects are active, if you're using oils as a barrier, whether it's Citrus Gall Wasp or citrus leaf miner, you've got to keep it there because it doesn't last more than a week, really, as a barrier. Okay.
Got an interesting question from Lorraine. With the prunings, does freezing the galls also kill them? And if so, how long would it take?
Yes, freezing will work really well. Some insects are very tolerant to freezing. Western flower thrips, you can freeze them and take them out of the fridge about a week or 2 weeks later and defrost them, and they just walk away. But I suspect Citrus Gall Wasp will not do that because it's a tropical species. I would say that in a normal freezer, which gets down to about -20, I think, I would be doing that for, if you can leave them in there for 5 or 6 days, no problems, that will work.
Right. Trini is wondering, how far can the adults fly? Okay,
good question. I haven't seen a number, but given the size of the wasp and the amount of spread, and knowing the Citrus Gall Wasp, it's in the family Bruchophagus, which are known normally as seed wasps, but this one's interesting. It's actually a gall-forming wasp that lays its eggs into the soft developing tissue, and then the plant develops the gall around it to protect itself from being chewed up by the larvae. I would say that you're looking at 30 to 40 meters, maybe 50 meters. A lot of people say, well, what happens to the wind blowing? Well, soft, delicate insects don't like being blown around by the wind. Small insects like that they'll grab hold and sit down. They'll only move in a breeze that's soft and gentle, and they'll only move when they can charge their wings up, and that's usually after temperatures above 10 to 20 degrees, they'll start being active. So I would say, and the other thing is, will they want to move? If you've got a lemon tree and there's no other hosts within 100 meters, they're not going to risk it. They're going to hang around that one lemon tree where they've been introduced to. If there's lemon trees close by, or grapefruit or something, 10, 20 meters, they'll get the scent from that. They will move from where they emerge out of the galls. But yeah, I'd say, yeah, safely, they're not going to move. Larger numbers aren't going to move over 50 to 100 meters. They're quite confined to the space.
So getting close neighbours involved in management would be important. perhaps the houses surrounding yours.
Yes, but the further you can go out, if you can get the whole street involved and you're in the middle of that street, then you're protected for 3 or 4 years if you can go and get them to prune all their galls out, because it has to re-invade. Well, I mean, you won't get them all out, but re-invade in large numbers into your property. Yeah.
And people were wondering what the make and brand of your pruners and pocket saw were. A couple of people missed that.
Yeah, okay. So pruners, these are I've had lots of pruners. That Felco are the best. I looked this morning, this is Felco number 2. There's different models, but this is the one that all the nurserymen use, and it's very robust. You get replacement blades, you can get replacement springs. I've actually, my late mother, I've got hers out the back. They're slightly different design with the class, but hers would be 60 years old and they're still going. They're fantastic. They're about $100, I think you get them for. The big department, the hardware store, the hardware store sells them, I think, no problems, or you can order them online. The saw I used, there's lots of different saws, but this one's called a silky. It's a Japanese saw. This one's actually a pocket boy. How's that? It's got a nice ergonomic soft handle. They're about $90. Replacement blades are about $40. The blade lasted about 10 years. It actually snapped. I got it caught when I was pruning and I bent it and it just snapped. It's hard steel. And I never had to sharpen it during that time. I bought what they call a feather file, which you can use to sharpen it, but I never had to use it. There's other brands that aren't folding. I just find the folding ones easy. I keep this in my back pocket, and the Felco's in a little holster I have in the front. So my hands are free, so I can, because I do climb up the trees to prune them as well as jump on a ladder. These silky, they're hard to get hold of because a lot of the department hardware stores and nursery stores like selling cheaper brands. This is not a cheap brand, but it's a beautiful saw to use and it lasts a long time. There's other brands like Barco and things like that. That's spelled B-A-H-C-O. That's a good saw too. I've got some fixed length saws, not a folding saw, that one, and I use that in a large pole to trim taller branches. I make my own trim. I actually went and bought aluminium rod, 6-meter aluminium rod, rather than buying. And another one I've used a paint roller, telescopic paint roller, and put the blade on top of that. So I've got one that goes out to just over 3 meters as well. So I can get up in the canopy without having to climb the trees. Okay.
Thanks, Darryl. Lorraine this is the last question on the chat so far. Lorraine wants to know a bit about the life cycle of the wasp. She's asked, in Perth Metro, has the wasp ever been noted to emerge in autumn or prior to the end of June, given the unusually hot weather you've had?
Well, not that I'm aware of. If you go to the Citrus Gall Wasp predictor that I'm sure Jackie will send around to everybody after this, if she hasn't already done it, you can actually put in there, and I think it's saying there for Perth, it says average emergence. The start was on the 15th of October and the finish was on the 10th of November. And it peaked on the 1st of November. In a cool year, the first emergence was the 24th of October, so a bit later. And the last one out was the 18th of November. On a warm year, now the year we've just had, it started off cool, then it got miserably hot and terrible. I don't think the data's in for that. But in a warm year, it said that the first noted emergence was the 6th of October. And the last one was on the 29th. So it actually came out earlier. Okay, so it's all over and done earlier. So in a warm year, they're going to be out and about earlier. So once they're out and about, so they're out and about, that's emergence, but then with egg hatch. So that's why after they mate and they go, so we're talking in a warm year, the finish of egg hatch was the 16th of December.
okay, in Perth in a warm year. So that's telling me that give yourself a bit of leeway there. So you could start pruning mid to late January. Get a flush in after that. Keep a lookout for more galls that you may have missed or that were later than that. And then you probably get a second flush in autumn. So you could be quite happily getting pretty good control and a nice flush in by mid-January if the last gall comes out on the 16th of December. I hope that helps.
Thanks, Darryl. And we've just shared the link to the prediction tool in the chat.
Right. And I think that's very it's a very useful tool. I spent a bit of time playing with it. Yeah, and a lot of people have spent time sitting there watching galls every day to work out when they first emergence, last emergence, and then when the wasps are around and when egg hatch too. So they've been dissecting galls to look at egg hatch. So do we have any other questions? Any feedback?
We've got no other questions in the chat. Does anyone have a question that they would like to ask Darryl before we finish? And I might also ask if Jackie's still there.
Yeah,
I've only got a few minutes left, Jackie. I'll hand over to you.
Yeah. I actually had a question, Darryl. I often get a lot of people asking sort of what the best strategy is so for those who are a bit more mobility impaired or they've got very old trees that are quite large. What the best way to maintain those, given that some of these trees can be sort of 5 meters or larger. Yeah,
well, I mean, in the good old days, nobody worried. Osh wasn't around, but even nurserymen, if you go and look at the way they prune their trees now, they keep them so they need smaller ladders. You're not climbing it. When I started picking apples back in the 70s, we used to go collect the apples, non-chemical ones that they hadn't had any sprays on because we were doing disinfestation trials on them with various cold storage and methyl bromide treatment. So we picked our own fruit and they were chemical free. Yeah, big trees, very scary, using squirrels. But if you've got a 5 meter tree, I'd be reducing that down to 2.5, 3 meters. You could, citrus is quite resilient. You can actually take a fair bit of material off. The rule of thumb with all sort of trees is only a 30-year, but I think you probably go more than citrus. I don't want to say that too loudly in case somebody trims a citrus and it dies. The other thing is, if you're pruning it back, you need to keep the water up to it, but not necessarily hit it with a lot of fertilizer just after you've pruned it. Just wait for it to start flushing, and then increase the fertilizer on it. But you may, if you've got a big tree, you can get somebody that knows what they're doing to come around, not just somebody with a chainsaw that takes it off a meter above the ground. But I have seen citrus taken off a meter above the ground and they've come back, no problems. But I'm not suggesting that. And over time, reduce it down from that 5 meters to 2.5 meters. Open the canopy up so it lets the light in and the wind in, and then you get less problems with disease issues. And things like that. If you're doing large prune cuts, have them angled so that if any rain gets on them, it runs off and it doesn't sit there causing rot and disease issues. And thin, if you're getting lots of forks, like I said, there was that one I put up that had 5 branches on it. Yeah, take that down, cut it right back and go down to 2 branches, okay? And don't be afraid to, a lot of people don't like pruning, I'll lose my lemons. There's still, half my lemons are going to lose. And I'm going, well, yeah, but you've still got half your lemons, and half your lemons is enough to feed the whole street anyway, if it's an old tree. So, yeah, don't be too worried about it. Look, the main problem I've seen recently is a lot of the older people in infill suburbs, people in their 80s are, they've moved on, one way or the other to a nursing home or off this mortal coil.
and some young person's come in and grab their tree, and the tree's there, and they just expect the lemons to arrive. What they don't realise is that person was putting a lot of mulch around, was doing supplemental watering, it was keeping it, and the tree wasn't getting stressed. The tree gets stressed, then borers get in and things like that, and then you end up very quickly with an X tree. So yeah, you just can't set and forget. Lemons are pretty forgiving, but other citrus, yeah, you've got to tend them a bit more. Yeah, so yeah, if you've got a 5-meter tree, I wouldn't be climbing that. That's too dangerous. I would be trimming it back and getting it into a more you know, suitable size that you can get up to with a small step ladder. Remember, never stand on the top of a ladder. Always have 2 rungs above your knee, so you've got something to lean on, and 3 points of contact as well. So that means only 1 arm free to do some pruning half the time, unless you can tie yourself on or something like that.
We probably have time for one more question, Darryl, and we have a good one from Melinda. She's in Brisbane and she's a brand new citrus grower, 2 lemons and a grapefruit. Both lemons have the galls on the branches, and now that it's May, she asks, what should she do here in Southeast Queensland? Wait till January to prune, or prune now?
Well, I'd prune now, and because it's Queensland and it's going to stay warmer, you'll get at least 1 more flush in, I would have thought now, at least 1. Yeah, I'm not the guru on Queensland weather, but yeah, it does seem to stay a little bit warmer than Perth. So yeah, I'd be pruning. If they're new trees, young trees, it does butcher them a bit. If she doesn't want the fruit, she can investigate pruning, and then next season using Confidor Guard or something like that if she can afford it. Otherwise, prune now and fertilise to get a flush. But because the small trees, don't over-fertilise.
Wonderful advice. Thank you so much, Darryl. So I think that just about wraps us up for the day. People are more than welcome to send us some more questions if anything comes to mind. Just had a query from Carol here about being a community garden and participating in the EDN, the Early Detector Network. If anyone who has joined us here on the webinar who is interested in becoming a Early Detector volunteer, you're more than welcome to go to the website. I can repost the link again and fill in the opt-in form. Thank you, Jess. Fill in the opt-in form, and I'll be in touch very soon in regards to the spring trapping campaign, and I'll send you out a kit where you can hang out the trap for 2 weeks and send it back to our entomologists, and we will be able to record our findings that we do not have a presence of the Asian citrus psyllid and huanglongbing in Australia at your location. So thank you very much, everybody. We'll finish up there, and thank you very much, Darryl, for giving us your time. I think we've all learned a bit more about looking after our citrus and keeping our citrus healthy.
Okay, I hope everybody enjoyed it. I did drone on too much, and that yeah, you found it useful. So I'm sure you'll give us some feedback, Jackie, offline. Thank you.
Thank you, and everyone have a good day.
Enjoy.
Bye.